Today we are discussing about proponents of Nativist Theory. Nativist Theory during 1960s, Chomsky questioned the idea that the human mind begins as a blank state and rejected the behaviorist theory because children receive improvised language input like baby talk. When growing up, Chomsky questioned how children could demonstrate signs of learning. Before receiving any formal education on grammatical rule, he suggested that the human brain must have evolved to contain certain linguistic information from birth, which helps children figure out the basic structures of language. So who is Noam Chomsky? Noam Chomsky is the best known and most influential linguist of the second half of the 20th century. He has made a number of strong claims about language. In particular, he suggests that language is an innate faculty, that is to say, that we are born with a set of rules about language in our heads, which refers to as the universal grammar. So, universal grammar is the basis upon which all human languages build. If a Martian linguist were to visit Earth, he would deduce from the evidence that there was only one language with a number of reasons why this should be so. Among the most important of these reasons is the ease with which children acquire their mother tongue.
And now, let's talk about language acquisition process. In terms of language acquisition, nativists believe that children are born with an inbuilt ability to organize and comprehend the fundamental laws and structure of language. They believe this is why children can learn a native language quickly. The nativist theory is often contrasted with the behavioral theory. Influential behaviorist theories such as Skinner and Watson argue that language or verbal behavior, as they call it, is learned through exposure to language, say at home or at school. This means language behaviors are modeled, usually by an adult, and then reinforced through reward for correct language uses or punishment for incorrect language use. Nativists, on the other hand, believe that children are wired to learn a language, almost regardless of their environment. More specifically, according to Chomsky, the LAD is a specialized language processor that contains universal underlying linguistic principles that children with the innate knowledge to speak and learn language. Environment only serves to activate the maturation of the LAD. Chomsky believed that the only humans were born with a LAD and believed that language was specific and unique to humans. Here are the key principles of Chomsky's model of language acquisition. Everyone is born with the innate ability to learn a language. Learning a language is instinctive. Every child is born with a language acquisition device. The LAD is a tool in the brain that facilitates the learning of language and grammar. All human languages share basic grammatical rules that humans have a subconscious ability to learn. Grammar is a necessary skill needed for learning any language.
Chomsky believed that the basic concepts of language are innate and are influenced by the language environment. Chomsky claims that it would be little short of a miracle if our children learned their language the same way they learned their mathematics or how to ride a bicycle. For example, children will automatically grasp the correct way to arrange dependent sentence structures without being taught, because a child has already learned complex language with their intricate grammatical rules and limitations without receiving explicit instructions. Children do not simply copy the language that they hear around them. They deduce rules from it, which they can use to produce sentences that they have never heard before. For example, no child would say, biscuit mommy. Instead, the child would say, mommy biscuit. The reason is that when a child starts to put words together, the child has already learned the basic rules of syntax, and even when the child makes an erroneous sentence, he or she can apply them correctly.
And now, we will discuss Chomsky's critique. Those linguists who do not agree with Chomsky point to several problems, of which I shall mention just four. People actually say, which is often Chomsky differentiates between competence and performance. Performance is ungrammatical, whereas competence is what they instinctively know about the syntax of their language, which is more or less equated with universal grammar. Chomsky concentrates upon this aspect of language. He thus ignores the things that people actually say. The problem here is that he relies upon people's intuitions as to what is right or wrong, but it is not clear that people will all make the same judgments, or their judgments actually reflect the way people use the language. Chomsky distinguishes between the core or central grammar of a language, which is essentially founded on the universal grammar, and peripheral grammar. Thus, in English, the fact that we were is considered correct and we was incorrect in historical accident, rather than integral part of the core grammar. As the late 18th century, recognized writers such as Dean Swift would write "we was" without feeling that they could committed a terrible error. Similarly, the outlawing of the double negation in English is peripheral, due to social and historical circumstances rather than anything specific to the language itself. To Chomsky, the real object of this linguistic science is the core grammar. But how do we determine what belongs to the core and what belongs to periphery? To some observers, all grammar is conventional, and there is no particular reason to make Chomskyan distinction. Chomsky also appears to reduce language to its grammar. He seems to regard meaning as secondary. A sentence such as "colorless green ideas sleep furiously" may be considered as part of the English language, for it is grammatically correct and therefore worthy of the study by transformation grammarians. A sentence such as "my mother, he know like bananas," on the other hand, is no interest to Chomskyan linguist. Nor would he be particularly interested in most of the utterances heard in the course of a normal lecture, because he disregards meaning and the social situation in which language is normally produced. He disregards in particular the situation in which the child learned his first language.